Welcome back, folks. I'm Jake Ellenbogen. He is Gary Sheffield Jr. This is Yankees Unloaded. And before we dive into today's loss, unfortunately, the Yankees lost 9-7 to the Red Sox. And, well, I want to say heartbreaking fashion, but heartbreaking is mostly when you're not expecting something to go the wrong way, and it does.
That's exactly what we thought was going to happen, Jake.
You knew it. You knew Clay Holmes wasn't going to get it done. But we're not even going to get into that. We're going to send it right over to our interview that we did with Jim Bowden, because right now I think Yankee fans need a jolt, and Jim Bowden's going to give you that because he thinks the Yankees are going to be pretty aggressive. And this is somebody who is very well respected and knows his stuff. So without further ado, here's our interview with Jim Bowden. Welcome back, guys. This is Yankees Unloaded. I'm Jake Ellenbogen. He is Gary Sheffield Jr. And we have our first guest of this show, Jim Bowden. How are you doing, man? Thank you so much for coming on.
I'm doing great. I mean, Jake and Chef, I love this time of year. I love the trade deadline because I always view the trade deadline as the GM being just as important as the star player. And the GM, a lot of times, is the one that's going to determine if they make the playoffs or if they win the World Series for what they do over the next several days. So it's a fun time of year. I love watching GMs perform and not perform during this time. So this one's going to be interesting for sure.
Yeah, well, Jim, we're looking at Brian Cashman, and this is a guy who's been the head honcho in New York for a while now. And so I don't know if necessarily a lot of our listeners are necessarily believing in what he's putting down. And so that's, I guess, what makes this such a stressful time. Because I know we talked last year and I was messaging you and asking you what's going to be happening. Are the Yankees going to be going for the big players or not? And we're in a similar situation right now. The Yankees are not winning games. Is there anything that you're hearing that's going to necessarily change the Yankees' aggressiveness heading into this deadline?
Yeah, I think there's a change because I'm hearing for the first time that they don't have any untouchables in their prospect group. You know, in the past, I've always heard they wouldn't trade Spencer Jones. They won't trade Jason Dominguez. That, you know, over the years, people are not going to do Chase Hampton. And we've heard that forever, right? Well, I'm being told by opposing GMs that they have not said that anyone is untouchable in the system. And I think Brian Cashman clearly understands this team has some needs, right? You're not getting any production from third base. That's a problem. DJ LeMahieu looks old. He does. He's declined. It's real. Gleyber Torres, until this week, has had a really down season. And this is a Yankee team with only two guys, Juan Soto and Aaron Judge, that have a positive OPS plus, right? I mean, so they have some problems in this lineup. Anthony Volpe is not living up to our expectations for the Yankees. So they have some problems. Now, they're going to get Giancarlo Stanton back. That power is going to help, no doubt about that. But I definitely think they need a third baseman. I know they've talked to the Rays about Isaac Paredes. They've talked to Colorado about Ryan McMahon. They've even talked to the Marlins about Jake Berger. So there is a possibility they trade for a third baseman, but they also need a reliever. They've talked to the Miami Marlins about left-hander Tanner Scott. That would be a really good fit. And they also understand they probably need another starting pitcher too. Because, look, even though you're going to get Clark Schmidt back, you've got to be worried about the way Garrett Cole is throwing. You've got to worry about the history of Carlos Rodon's shoulder. And so there's really more questions than answers. So the Yankees have a lot of needs. And, look, Brian Cashman knows this team is good enough to win the World Series, but he's going to have to make 2 or 3 moves to actually win it.
No, I absolutely agree with you. I mean, that's really, we've been talking about it like until, we're blue in the face over here. Just, I mean, right now, it's not a shock. You have Juan Soto, you have Aaron Judge. And we kept saying at the beginning of the year, this team feels different. Really, right now, we're realizing the team feels different because they have Juan Soto and Aaron Judge. It's not that much different. And so I totally agree. Gary and I really, I've been more of like the prospect hugger of the two of us, but even I'm open now to like making trades because this is just, it's gotten to be ridiculous. So I wanted to start off here by asking you about the Jazz Chisholm report that came out that the Yankees, don't know if he would mesh with the locker room and all that. Is that report, is there any validity there to Jazz Chisholm? Because, Gary and I both would obviously like to see him in this lineup.
Yeah, there is accuracy to that. So I've heard both with Philadelphia and New York, there is concerns about Jazz. Now, I love Jazz Chisholm's talent. I love how much fun he has. I love the fact that he's got that power speed combination where, he's capable of 20-20 or 30-30 later in his career. He does show up late, right? he works hard and has a good time, but he has not been surrounded by veteran guys that can help guide him and keep him in line. And I think there's a lot of evaluators and team executives that think he'd be a better fit for a team like the Pittsburgh Pirates or Kansas City Royals in a smaller marketplace. I kind of am a little bit different in that I've always had the feeling that if you have the right clubhouse, your leaders will help him develop and change those concerns. So in my own opinion, I would trade for Chisholm. I would put him at second base if I'm the Yankees, because I love the speed and the power. And if I had him and Volpe at the top ahead of Judge and Soto, I would have traffic. I would have the threat of a stolen base. I would create more fastballs. I would create more offense. So I personally would like it. I also believe that Aaron Judge is a true leader. And I do believe if he was in the Yankee clubhouse, you would see him quickly learn because of the players around him, what it takes to be a champion, what it takes to be a Yankee, something he doesn't have with Miami. He doesn't have a lot of veteran leadership to help guide him to get to that next level. Now, if he gets traded to the Pirates, he's going to have Andrew McCutchen, and Andrew McCutchen is going to be able to help him there. So that's kind of how I feel on it. But there is truth to that with the Phillies and Yankees both kind of staying away from him because of concerns of that.
So we'd be boarding school per se. We'd be sending Jazz Chisholm off to become a better person and a better man.
I think a better baseball player. I think a more dedicated player that would learn how to win, because he's got the tools to be a star. And I think if you put him in New York, I think he would embrace New York. That's my own personal opinion being around him. He's a lot of fun, and I think he likes the big stage. So I personally think, unlike a lot of people, that he'd be able to handle it, but I understand why people have trepidation.
Yeah, because there's a lot of guys on the Yankees right now that frankly aren't very inspiring to watch. You're not seeing a lot of hustle. Guys aren't diving all over the field. It doesn't look like you're watching like Eric Burns. Okay, like there's not a ton of energy around Yankee Stadium right now. Jazz Chisholm is the energy. When he's playing well, he looks like a superstar. And then of course you turn on a Marlins game, into which you do for a career, and you watch these teams. Sometimes Jazz Chisholm, you'll watch him and say, who is this player that I was talking so highly of? And so him being in New York obviously is a huge microscope that can really help. But Jim, I want to transition to Clay Holmes, because right now this is a huge question mark for the Yankees. When you're closing games for this team, it is obviously high stakes, and it seems that Clay Holmes can't really handle that situation. He's not necessarily consistent. Now, the Yankees obviously would probably love to find an upgrade there, but do you think that the Yankees right now are prioritizing bats over an arm in the back end of the bullpen, or do you think they're looking at both equally?
Oh, I know they're looking at both equally. Absolutely. And we talked about Chisholm's. Let's talk about his teammate, Tanner Scott. I mean, the Yankees are all in trying to get Tanner Scott, and to put Tanner Scott with Clay Holmes in the back of the bullpen makes a lot of sense, because then you have two closers, and you could go with a hot hand or you can mix and match. They have competition, though, because the Baltimore Orioles, who just acquired Sir Anthony Dominguez today from the Phillies, are also in on Tanner Scott, because Craig Kimbrell blew his sixth save last night. And like Holmes, he's been struggling lately as well, which is why the Orioles haven't taken advantage of how poorly the Yankees have been playing, because they've been playing poorly as well. So there's a lot of teams having closers problems, and that's why you're gonna see both the Orioles and Yankees add pitching. Now, I also understand the Yankees have had a lot of conversations with the Angels regarding Carlos Estevez, who is going to be traded between now and Tuesday. That's a slam dunk. In fact, they already have an offer on the table they like. They're trying to get a better offer. But I think either Estevez or Tanner Scott would give the Yankees that second option. They don't have to acquire that impact closer. But if you get a guy like Estevez or Scott to combine with Holmes, that's going to be the best play here. So I definitely think the Yankees will get a reliever. I think they have to get a reliever.
Oh, I definitely agree with you. And I think it seems like every single episode of this show, we've been saying Tanner Scott, Jazz Chisholm, the Yankees. It just makes a lot of sense. Want to, shift gears here, because I like going back in in history and seeing how, this whole thing has played out, the deadline. And no one can forget Jordan Montgomery having a great season, all kind of the buzz that, Cashman didn't really believe he could pitch in the postseason effectively. He was traded for Harrison Bader. The reason I bring that up is because I feel like this is kind of an interesting thing. Now that that's already been set, that precedent's been set, and Montgomery was having a good year when he was traded. Is there anybody that's available on the current Yankees roster right now, whether that's a Verdugo, a Gleyber Torres, that could have that similar fate to Jordan Montgomery?
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned two names. I mean, look, Jason Dominguez is going to come off the IL before long. He's already on rehab. And when Dominguez comes off, he's a better player than Verdugo. And in fact, you could put Dominguez in center and Aaron Judge in left if you wanted to at that point as an option. They're really down on Gleyber Torres. I'm not sure how much trade value he has. He's had a really good week. Hopefully he can build off of that, but I'm not sure the trade value is there to get that starter. But the one thing that's been interesting over the last 24 hours is the news that the Giants are shopping Blake Snell. And the fact that Garrett Crochet of the White Sox all of a sudden said that he won't pitch for a team unless he gets a long-term deal in October. That's taken him off the trade market.
It's insane.
The Tigers aren't getting any traction on Tariq Skubal. So that means all of a sudden Blake Snell becomes one of the most sought-after starters. And a Blake Snell to the Yankees trade makes a lot of sense to me. It does. You can always put Lewis Heel back in the bullpen. You know, you talk about adding a bullpen arm. Well, you could always take Heel and put him in the back end of that bullpen as well if you're able to trade for a guy like Blake Snell or Jack Flaherty. So the Yankees, believe me, Brian Cashman does his due diligence. There's a reason why the Yankees have never had a losing record under Brian Cashman's leadership. Say what you want. I know you haven't had the world championships that you expect, but every single year you're practically in the hunt. And part of the reason is he does his due diligence. He talks to every team. He seems a little bit more aggressive, is what GMs are telling me, this particular trade deadline than most, but you never know. I mean, that's the one thing about Cash, as you know, Chef, at deadlines. Sometimes he makes deals and sometimes he stands pat, so you just really don't know. But this year he seems more open to trading his prospects than ever before. So I'm expecting some activity in the Bronx.
Okay, well, I mean, I will tell you, you're expecting some activity. Do you think that after this deadline's all said and done, Jim, we got to ask you honestly, what are we looking at for the New York Yankees? Because like you just said, the baseline is high with Brian Cashman, right? With Aaron Boone. We still are a winning franchise, and we considered last year a major failure. We still won 82 games. Now, that's not great for the New York Yankees, but overall, it's not that bad. But I will say, in our defense here, Jim, the goal is to win a World Series title. Obviously, this is a standard set by Derek Jeter, and that doesn't just go away. And it won't go away, frankly. That's the way we judge him. Do you think after this deadline's all said and done, Yankees fans are somewhat satisfied with this deal that we made?
No, they're Yankee fans. You're not going to be satisfied. There's zero chance of that. Now, Chef, you knew the answer to that before you asked me. I mean, look,
I know.
When this trade deadline is done, you're going to be a second-place team in the AL East. When this trade deadline is done, you're going to have a wild card team. And when this trade deadline is done, it's not going to be as much about who you acquired. It's going to be more about what Garrett Cole are we going to get the rest of the way? What Carlos Rodon are we going to get the rest of the way? What Clay Holmes are we going to get the rest of the way? And will Jason Dominguez have some impact as we go forward? So the trade deadline is going to help, but it's not going to write the storyline if the Yankees can bring back another world championship. The storyline is going to be written by Garrett Cole and the starting pitching, which, by the way, we could talk about the hitting and the bats all we want. That starting pitching the first 2 months of the season was phenomenal. It was good enough to win a World Series, and it's gone away, and that's what's got to get back on track.
I absolutely agree with that point. And unfortunately, there's been a lot of, I guess, push to have more, bat to ball contact and less power in this lineup than they have in the past. The problem is when you have bat to ball contact, it's just ground balls. It doesn't really do a whole lot unless you're Aaron Judge hitting that 112 miles an hour and that's going in the outfield. Not a lot of these guys are running out those ground balls. So wanted to wrap up with two things here. First thing is Spencer Jones. Wanted to get your thoughts on Spencer Jones around the rest of the league, because I think that's the thing Gary and I are very curious about. We see MLB.com, he's rated number 2. He's 74th right now out of 100. But where does the rest of the league see Spencer Jones as a prospect?
Yeah, so I've seen a lot of Spencer Jones myself. I'm well aware of what he is. Good-looking kid. The power and speed are real. He's going to be a 20-homer, 20-steal guy, maybe more than that, maybe 25, 25. I worry about the hit tool. I thought there'd be more development in that. He's got a lot of swing and miss in his game. He bars his front arm and hasn't really corrected that. I just saw him in the Futures game. I'm not sure he's ever going to be a 2, 3, 4 hitter in a lineup, but I think he's got a chance to be a solid 5 or 6 hole hitter. with that power and speed combination. Look, I think he's got a chance to be a good player, but would I trade him if I could get Skubal or Crochet and control them? Yeah, I would make that deal. Would I trade him if I got Chisholm and Tanner Scott? Yeah, he's gone right now. What time's the press conference? So that's kind of where I stand on it. And I think the industry's pretty similar to that. But I will say this. I'd say probably a third of the teams kind of view him as their second best prospect on the Yankees. I think a third of the teams probably see him as a top 10, and a third of the teams have more questions than that.
I mean, would you say the Yankees track record though, Jim, is they don't necessarily have the track record of position players that have developed. So when you say that when people call it the Yankees tax, and we hear this a lot,
yeah,
don't you think in some regard, a Yankees tax is also the other organization saying, well, hold on a second, the Yankees don't necessarily tell us the truth with these guys?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's up to the other teams to scout players and make your judgments on if you like them or not. And the teams that have the prospects, their job is to sell how good they are. In this day and age, though, you can't really sell anybody on a prospect, right? Because the evaluation process today is better than ever. We have all this science to determine exactly your bat speed, exactly your barrel percentage. We can really break down a player that you can't convince any executive or any person that someone is better than what the science is telling us. And so that part's kind of confusing. In terms of the tax, it is true for whatever reason, for the most part, because over the years, the conversations I've had with Brian and other general managers, it does seem for whatever reason that teams tend to ask more for the Yankees for players than other teams. But I also think, to your point, and I'll agree with it, I think there are times where the Yankees evaluate their players better than what the rest of the industry does. And I point back to, in particular, the trade back in the day that sent Garrett Cole from Pittsburgh to Houston, where the Yankees felt like they were getting screwed and they felt like they had a better offer on the table. And I remember back then asking, what was your offer? And I didn't think at the time their offer was any better than what they ended up getting from Houston. So I think sometimes the tax is real. And I think sometimes the tax is because the Yankees, quite frankly, think their prospects are better than the rest of the industry thinks.
Yeah, I love that answer, because we actually just went through like painstaking detail of the last it was top 10 of every Yankee farm system from 2011 to now. And you just can't find too many guys that really turned into anything that would be considered a star. I mean, it was really just Aaron Judge. And then you had, Luis Severino and, but really just Aaron Judge is the one where you would say, yeah, that's a superstar. So, yeah, I mean, I tend to agree. I could see how the Yankee tax could be real, but also, you kind of, everyone else can see what you're doing over the last however many years, and you gain that reputation. But Jim, we really appreciate your time. This has been awesome to hear all this. And it sounds like they're going to be active. That's kind of all we could really ask for at this point. But really interested on the Chisholm thing that you mentioned. We were hoping that there wasn't any validity to that, because we both like him. In closing, you don't think he ends up as a Yankee, essentially?
I don't know where he ends up. I think he ends up, I've had conversations with Peter Bendix, the GM of the Miami Marlins, and he's been very clear. He's not looking for any particular player. He's not looking for any particular position. He said he just wants the best players he can get for Chisholm and Tanner Scott. So I believe if the Yankees offer the best prospects he can get for those two guys, then I think the Yankees are going to get them. The question is, are the Yankees going to pay that price, and are they focused enough on Jazz? And I just kind of get the impression that it's more likely that if they trade those kind of prospects, it'll be Isak Paredes and Peter Fairbanks instead of Jazz Chisholm and Tanner Scott. But time will tell. Tick-tock, tick-tock.
TikTok is right.
Time is ticking. And Jim, we will see you hopefully in Cooperstown, with my dad being enshrined at some point, right, with the Players Committee. It's been a long time coming. We obviously, the Sheffield family, we see everything that you write. We really appreciate you.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Blake. Appreciate you guys.
Absolutely. You take care. All right. So that was Jim Bowden. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Big shout out to Gary Sheffield Jr. right here for actually getting this thing done. Great booking agent over here for Yankees Unloaded.
Just great at what I do. The old Twitter machine going to work.
Those Twitter fingers. Well, oh yeah, you type in the
Yeah, I'm a two finger typer. And by the way, for those of you who watched the entirety of that interview, and since you're here, you did. How depressing was that about Spencer Jones? I know we were talking about it before we ever went live. You mentioned it, and I was saying, man, maybe the Yankees prospects just really aren't worth two hoots to these other organizations. Maybe you're rated the second best prospect. Perhaps that doesn't mean you're going to be a star. Maybe that just means you're the medium-sized fish in a small pond, I guess, is really what Bowden said there.
Maybe you're just Gleyber Torres in a contract year, hitting 5th or 6th in a lineup where you're like, maybe you shouldn't actually be hitting 5th or 6th in the lineup. But all jokes aside, I think the reason it's kind of disappointing is because you had this guy immediately being compared to left-handed Aaron Judge. Now, it's not to say that he is exactly what Jim Bowden projected, but I think Jim Bowden kind of hit the nail on the head. I kind of think that's what he could end up being. And the reason being, if we take off the goggles here, and we've been talking about it for a while, just call up Spencer Jones because it can't get much worse. Well, that's not really a viable reason to call him up. We were just kind of joking at the same time being serious because, I mean, it was really that bad and it still is that bad. So let's not, but the point here is that, Spencer Jones could absolutely end up being a star. Okay. His story's not written, but when you have a guy who's like 6'8" or whatever he is, he's very, very tall.
How many homers he got?
He's got like 10 homers. And this is a guy that was breaking StatCast records in college. So I guess I just expect a little bit more power. When I heard 2020, that wasn't like a good thing. I was kind of like, it's just,
you don't put somebody on the untouchables list and then at the very last second say, you know what, we're going to deal them. And the projection from respected writers in baseball in general is that this guy might just be a guy. Okay, or a starter in this league, because something has to be said, Jake, for somebody who's good enough to start in this league. But I will say, being good enough to be a starter doesn't mean a rip to anybody in our comment section. It doesn't mean anything to us too. It doesn't mean anything. And when you tell me that I've just got a starter and potentially not a star, baseball doesn't see Spencer Jones as a star. To be official, he's the 82nd ranked prospect. Okay, so according to MLB.com, in Baseball America, we have 81 prospects across baseball that they think are better. Okay. Now, if that's the truth or anything close to the truth, well, the Yankees should be in a hurry trying to get back value for Spencer Jones, because I'm here to tell you right now, that's not good enough. Okay. If it ends up that 30 of these prospects, not 80, 30 of them are better than Spencer Jones, well, then doesn't that mean we don't have a star on our hands? We just have a dude? Well, a dude is not going to win a World Series. We need a dog. Okay?
No,
that's what the situation that we're in. So I just think, Jake, this interview taught me a lot. It really taught me that this was the first time we can just, and I know a lot of our audience probably this is exactly what they thought, but it's good to see it confirmed that perhaps most of baseball around us doesn't view us the same way that we see ourselves.
Yeah, and I thought he had a great point when, you and I were both, that was great, by the way, that you brought up the Yankee tax. Genius of you. And we had, we like to integrate our conversations that we had from previous episodes. I think we do that very well. And you did that right on the spot. Yeah, you did that right on the spot in the interview. And you brought up the Yankee tax. I loved his answer because he basically said it is real. But he also agreed with kind of the sentiment that, the Yankees are a little bit higher on their guys than maybe the rest of the league is. And look, I mean, it's to be expected because say what you will about the Dodgers, but like the Yankees have always been known as the team that trades away the prospects. I mean, Steinbrenner did that all the time. George, not Hal, but, and I think that's kind of the thing is that, and to be fair, the Yankees are also known for the team to have the core four and didn't trade those prospects away.
It required patience at the time, 100%.
But it's no different than right now because, I mean, who's from the farm system right now in the lineup that you would actually say, I wouldn't mind, or you would say, I hope he is on the roster moving forward and playing good baseball. I mean, In the lineup just today from the farm system, Judge, Wells, we'll give Torres because he was barely in the Cubs farm system. Ben Rice, that's 4 right there. Volpe 5, Cabrera 6. 6 out of the 9 hitters today are from the farm system, right? Now, do you want all 6 hitters being in the lineup next year or even after the deadline? No. But I'll tell you the guys that I do want. Judge, Wells. I'm really liking what I'm seeing out of Volpe. The home run was great. I think he's a more rejuvenated player since the little break that he had. Now, I know you're sitting there like, but hear me out. I'm willing to see this through with him. Cabrera's almost hitting 250. You know, there are things to like, and especially today.
We've got young players. He's almost hitting 250. And I love that you bring up the core 4. We should call this group the Bore 4. Boring is all get up. We're celebrating. And by the way, you're accurate in celebrating batting averages approaching 250 or 240, which is league average. Okay. Because Gleyber Torres is now hitting 237. And that seems really good. League average is 240. So we're celebrating.
Well, that's not really good.
The small victories.
Trust me, I'm definitely one of those people. I've tempered my expectations. I've brought my expectations like everyone needs to hit 300. Everyone needs to hit 280. It's gone down each year.
I think 275 will suffice. I remember our prediction because I asked you about Anthony Volpe. I actually wanted to know your take on where batting average wise, nothing else, right? No power numbers, none of that fugazi stuff.
I saw him as a 270, 275 hitter.
You were asking for 270 to 275. And I told you I would gladly accept that. He hit 205 his rookie year. If he can go out there and hit 275, I can justify a projection in year 3 that could potentially start scratching the surface towards 290 to 300 and actually live up to these expectations that we gave him. But I will say, of course, Anthony Volpe had the big homer today. It was a great swing. He looked really good today. Overall, I love the way he played today. But the way that we judge these players, all of them, is based on what you do consistently over a large sample size. And based on what a lot of these guys have done, and anytime we bring up the core 4 still that you have to perform at some point earlier in your career so that people can believe in the future. Now, Derek Jeter, we need to bring up Derek Jeter here. He hit early in his career, okay? So everyone that keeps talking about, well, we need to believe in the young players to see it out in the future. Well, Derek Jeter was making a ton of errors. The question with Jeter was whether or not he could stay at shortstop, and the Yankees stuck with that. They weren't contemplating getting rid of Derek Jeter. He was hitting. Now, you can't tell me that if Derek Jeter was just playing a good shortstop and he was hitting 200, that the Yankees in year 3 in like 1997 would be freaking out about Derek Jeter. They wouldn't be. Part of the reason why you talk about people's position in the core 4, the Posadas, right, and the Marianos, is because of what they show you early on. And so a lot of this group right now is pretty lethargic overall. Like, I really do think, and our audience in general, very nuanced group. They're going to watch a 45-minute or a 2-hour podcast. They're going to give us a chance to talk about all these takes. And Jake, they watch every game. If you watch our show every single day, you are watching every game. That's just the audience that we've built, frankly. And they know what these guys look like long-term. So I'm thrilled to see some of these guys on the trend up. But as Bowden says, when it comes to filling some of these holes that clearly need to be filled, right? Closer, third base, DJ LeMahieu came up at a huge at-bat late in this game. Absolutely blasphemous work from Aaron Boone. There's so many issues with this team, manager, that I almost feel guilty asking for a big trade deadline because it's like, do I really, A, I don't trust the guy to make the moves that need to be made. And then B, even if you put him through the door, do we even have the guy who can drive this bus? I don't think so. So we're just in an ugly, ugly spot. And thankfully, Bowden actually got on our show and got honest because he easily could have punted some of those answers. When we asked him about the Yankees tax, you can punt some of these answers. You can punt the Spencer Jones question. We really had a lot of questions answered today, and it should be an eye-opener for Yankees fans.
Yeah, I mean, he brought up. I'm really glad we talked about Clay Holmes with him because full disclosure, we recorded it before the show, so we were not aware that Clay Holmes was going to blow tonight's game.
It was perfect.
And to be fair, it wasn't just Clay Holmes. I mean, Weaver gave up 3 runs too. So, let's be honest here. But still, Clay Holmes was brought in and absolutely punted the game. And it was just, actually, I want to talk about this because we said if Anthony Volpe gets going, they can start win baseball games, right? And, like if he gets back to where he was, that's going to help the lineup. Well, how about this? So Anthony Volpe is hitting now over 350 since the All-Star break, right? They're 2-4 in those games, actually 2-5 in those games. So he's doing his job. His OPS is now at 940 since the All-Star break. Right?
Because technically his role, you have to also remember this, Jake. He's not in the same role. So if he was hitting 350, but he was hitting leadoff, it would be a different story. It would be much more impactful. But he's hitting behind Ben Rice, who is like 4 for his last 100 at bats, it feels like. Yeah. So the impact of a guy hitting 350 in the 6 or 7 spot isn't as drastic as if it was at leadoff. So I totally understand what you're saying. And I think it's a good point. But we also have to kind of pull back the hood here and ask, why isn't this registering as a win? Well, Anthony Volpe overall is playing some pretty good ball since the break. You bring it up. Great ball. He's running the bases. He's much more aggressive. He's not just slapping ground balls. He's driving the ball. He's putting balls in seats, something that we came to expect in 2024. But when you hit 7th, it is going to minimize your impact. That's part of the drawback. So it was why we wanted to push him up in the lineup. We were hoping he'd be able to handle that. He clearly couldn't. And now we are here. So why are we losing baseball games? Well,
you're as good as your closer. Did I not
say that? You're as good as your
that?
closer. You have said this more than one time. You probably said it 10 times. And it's so true.
Record.
It's so true because isn't the reason that Baltimore right now, we're even in this race with Baltimore?
Because they don't have a closer.
Craig Kimbrell can't close a game to save his life. Okay? We should be forever.
They lost to San Diego today.
Yeah.
They lost to San Diego at home. At home. So I think that's what's the most frustrating about this loss is that Baltimore just continues to lose and the Yankees continue to lose. And today, this should have been a win, okay? It looked like a win. Even when Boston got up to that, I think they were up 3-1 at one point.
Oh, you felt like they were going to win today?
Yeah, I actually...
no, at no point did I actually I was watching this game in my car, okay?
Well, do you know why I thought they were going to win?
I was texting my mother, and I was like, this game's a wrap. We're not winning this game.
I thought they were going to win because, well, when Clay Holmes came out, I knew it was over. I didn't care about the lead. I knew it was over.
Did you see my Twitter?
Yeah.
I was tweeting. I told you, I said, hey, when Clay Holmes comes into this game, do not, and I repeat, and still don't, do not tweet me and try to essentially clown on me. Because I'm here to tell you right now, I'm going for my nightly walk. Every time Clay Holmes goes in, I go for a walk.
Time for a walk.
Yeah, I go walking. I don't watch the game. And so when people tell me, oh, Clay Holmes, it looked like he had good stuff, but he was giving up hard contact. Anytime you see Clay Holmes in the game, I'm out. I am immediately just walking around my neighborhood, and I wait for my phone to jingle. And does it. Every time. Does it. I get my phone buzzes off the hook, don't you know, when Clay Holmes pitches.
Oh my God, I can only imagine. Now with the game today, though, the reason why I felt like that is because Cortez gets out and he's giving up 4 runs. And I'm like, okay, I actually like the at-bats today. I felt like they had an actual attack. They were in attack mode. They had a plan. And I was like, okay, well, we got Luke Weaver, who unfortunately, ended up blowing this game sky high, as well as Clay Holmes. But you got Luke Weaver, I didn't know if he'd pitch today or not, but I'm thinking about Tonkin. I'm thinking about Canely. I'm thinking about, Cousins. And I'm like, yeah, they got arms that I trust to get them through that. And then I think, once you get Cortez out, I think the runs cease. And then I like the at-bats, and I think eventually something is going to happen. And I was right. Something did happen. Aaron Judge hit a ballistic 470-foot home run. The furthest...
That was a bomb.
I've never seen a ball go over there, ever. I've watched Fenway Park games on TV at Fenway Park. I've never seen anything like that. So that, obviously was a 3-run shot, and it's 6-4 at that point. And then Wells hits a back-to-back homer. So that's 7-4. At that point in time, I was not willing to say the game was over, but I felt pretty good about the game. And this is kind of what I was feeling, something like that was going to happen. It just felt like that. Like, again, when you put the bat on the ball and when you have good at bats and when you look aggressive at the plate, but it's like a controlled aggression, that stuff gets rewarded, especially when you bury into the bullpen. And that's what they did.
Often, yes.
So they had 7 runs. Most often than not, when the Yankees score at least 5 runs, they win baseball games. Well, Rafaela hits a 2-run shot to make it 7-6. And then, of course, we have Clay Holmes comes in and he gives up the Abreu double, and then Yoshida, and that's all she wrote. And it's unfortunate because as soon as Clay Holmes came in, I knew the game was over. But up until that point, even still, like, I think even if they continued to roll with Weaver, I think he gets out of it. I really do. I'm not saying he was pitching well, but
he actually wasn't pitching well in his last start either. Like his last time he went out there, he had no fastball command. If you remember, and a lot of our podcasts, our audience is he was essentially going change up. He was pitching like Tommy Canley. Okay. He could only locate the changeup. Yes, broadcast actually brought up a great point today. They were mentioning he has completely abandoned the cutter. He's not throwing it. He has no fastball command, so it leads us to the changeup. And long and behold, that's all he threw today. And then when he did throw a fastball, it was a 3-ball count. Very predictable. He threw back-to-back fastballs right down the chute, and it gets deposited into the bleachers or over the monster, as we like to put it. So that's what you can come to expect. And what was really interesting of and they don't usually do this unless something's going to happen, is when before Clay Holmes ever even released a baseball today, he touches the rubber, and Michael K brought up the point that, man, Girardi actually brought this up. They don't have a guy who can get a swing and miss with a breaking ball. Could you imagine sending somebody out there that we were actually questioning. People were saying at the beginning of the year,
they have Clay Holmes
the best closer in the game. One of.
Yeah. They have one guy.
Who?
Cousins.
Yeah, and is Jake Cousins going to pitch in the World Series?
No. But here's what I will say. I understood Cousins
We're not going to get there, but you get the point.
Yeah. I understand why Cousins didn't come into this game. This is a team that I thought was very patient at the plate at the end of the game. Cousins is trying to get you to chase outside the zone. So it would have been a recipe for disaster. And that's why Weaver, like, as soon as Weaver started losing his command, like, that was a problem. Now, again, I still think he could have gotten out of that. I had no faith in Clay Holmes. None. But either way, both of them were
do you
bad.
realize somebody that's paid millions of dollars to manage the New York Yankees believes in Clay Holmes? And I bet you if we had a conversation with Aaron Boone, he obviously publicly would say, well, I believe in my guy. It's his job. He's done it before. That's what he'd tell us, right? One foot in front of the other. He's going to figure it out. I believe in my guys. That's what he would say. But behind closed doors, I know Aaron Boone knows baseball. He's just not applying it. And whether or not that's intentional or somebody else is in charge, you cannot tell me with a straight face that you thought the best way for the Yankees to win this game was for Clay Holmes to come into the game. If I have to go for walks and I have to exercise,
why is he in?
Okay. Anytime that happens, they're like, yeah, think of it this way. Yes was saying and admitting Boone is asking for more than 3 outs from Clay Holmes. How many people, show of hands in the comments, believe that Clay Holmes can get 3 outs? Nobody.
No.
Why would he be able to get 5? How? How do you think that? And then you know what they'd tell us?
Clay Holmes is 2 for 2 in the month of July. 2 for 2. He's 2 and 2, excuse me. He's blown 2 saves and he saved 2 games. And
sick.
I mean, that's not good. That's not good.
The same chances that Shaquille O'Neal makes a free throw is Clay Holmes saving a game. That's where we are. And it's not even, we are in a situation where we know for a fact Nobody believes Clay Holmes can get 3 outs. And then our manager, who people want me to believe that we're making excuses, it's really Brian Cashman. No, it's both of them. You thought that this guy who can't get 3 outs can get 5 suddenly. And then now that you're telling me, well, no, it's Cashman's fault. He doesn't have the personnel. Then why is Cashman there? Why is anyone there? None of them are doing anything competent.
I still have no idea how you can blame Cashman when you have stuff like this from Boone. I mean, did Cashman go out there and say, you know what? I know Ben Rice is struggling, but by the way, the last time he was struggling like this, he hit a 3-run shot that was all for naught right before the All-Star break. But he had a 3-run shot.
Cashman for what exactly? This game in particular?
Well, no, I'm saying Boone put out DJ LeMahieu to pinch hit.
Correct. Well, DJ LeMahieu was in as a defensive replacement because Boone thought that the game was going to be won defensively. We needed that upgrade out there.
Yeah,
so that's what he did. And
ironically, they lost it defensively.
Correct. He believed that Weaver and Holmes could essentially tag team the end of the game, and we wouldn't have to worry about the bat later on. How foolish is that? Foolish. Absolutely. Anyone could have told you this game was going to come down to the wire, whether we won or not. And Boone says,
I guarantee you,
let's just put the defensive upgrade at third base. We're not losing. We've lost 1 game with our glove, and it was the Baltimore game in the finale. And we're sitting here worried about that. Why don't we worry about the bats? How about that?
Yeah.
Worry about the bats.
It's really a joke at this point. I mean, if you didn't feel like they needed to make a move until tonight has to be the thing that finally broke the glass in your mind. Like, wow, shit, we need to make a move. You can't have a game where Austin Wells and Gleyber Torres are combining for 6 hits. Aaron Judge is going yard. Freaking Verdugo is coming through in the leadoff spot, going 2 for 4. Cabrera goes 2 for 4. Volpe goes 2 for 5. Hell, Grisham has a huge, hit off the green line. Like, you can't have a game like that. Have everybody pick up where Juan Soto essentially went 0 for 4. Okay. And it didn't matter because the offense scored 7 runs and they have 14 hits. You can't lose a game like that. And to me, if you do, some of that has to be put on your manager because you can't have it both ways. Okay. How often, Gary, do you get the whole, well, Boone's just going out there and trying to do his job. The guys have to compete. The guys have to,
the players do have to play, but there really, frankly, aren't very good players out there. I mean, let's be real. If I'm,
but the offense produced.
So no, they produced tonight.
You see what I'm saying? So like when this happens, what is the excuse now for Boone? See what I'm saying?
Well, but I understand what you're saying, but the way that I try and broadcast this team is not necessarily on a nightly basis. I try to discuss this team as what's my expectation going forward and what does this team do most often? And when I look at this roster, they gave us something tonight, okay? And for those of you listening, this will be yesterday. Now, did I expect Ben Rice to show up and give me any production whatsoever today? No. He's hitting under 200. He's 4 for his last 49, okay? He's an out. Whether it's against a lefty, whether against a righty, whether there's a reliever or a closer, it doesn't matter who it is. He's an out, okay? DJ LeMahieu, he's on the bench. He's not playing today, okay? He came in defensively as a first baseman. He's your best option off the bench. Just poor personnel. Yes, Aaron Boone is making a pivotal mistake bringing him into the game. Why is he even allowed to be brought into the game? How's he even a part of the roster? He's a part of the roster, and you're allowing somebody who doesn't know how to do the job. Like, it's like giving a bad driver a bus with freaking 2 wheels. It's not going to work. The dude can't drive anyway. So you need to give him a souped up roster, which a lot of people have described. Yeah, Aaron Boone knows how to manage when he's got a super bullpen. Yeah, so does anybody else. So does Girardi. Girardi gets to the ALCS as well with a super bullpen. So what? Get me a manager that can get me over the top. Get me a manager who can bring more out of less. This manager is just waiting around and going, well, I'm just going to see if guys pick it up. And then you get a random night where Gleyber Torres goes 3 for 5. Austin Wells puts on a show. Volpe goes 2 for 5 with a bomb to dead center. And then we go, oh, well, like we brought in these other guys and they gave us nothing. We expected nothing out of those guys. We expected nothing out of Holmes. Why is Holmes at closer? Why is he on the roster? No one has an explanation for me yet. Yes, Boone is making horrible, horrible decisions. We literally called for his job the last episode. We are consistent. But how is it physically possible that I'm showing up, entering even close to the deadline, and 4 or 5 of these guys in my lineup, regardless of what they gave me last night, why are they a part of the team? Why is DJ LeMahieu on the roster, whether or not it's for defense or not? He's not good enough to play on the Yankees. So he needs to be released. DFA'd. It is that simple.
Yeah.
And that way, once you've DFA'd him, anybody at all, I don't care where they come from in the system, is an upgrade. And then you allow Boone, who also cannot do the job at all, a better opportunity to accidentally fall into a win.
To accidentally fall into a win. You're funny.
It's an accident. It's a joke. We lose. You brought it up, Jake. You brought me the numbers. I didn't do this research.
Yeah.
You told me this Yankees team flat out can't win a game in the second half of the year. This is consistent. This is not a 2023 and 2024 issue. No, this is an issue long term. You take your pick which year. The Yankees, outside of the years that Baltimore was deliberately tanking for prospects, we couldn't win games in the second half of the year. Ever since then, ever since the AL East has been competent, we don't beat any of those teams. That's one. And two, Jake, we don't win when it matters. And most likely, if you look at our personnel, doesn't it make so much sense that we don't win games when it matters? Doesn't it? Did you expect to go to the ALCS and did you expect really to go play Philadelphia in the World Series with Ben Rice? Really? Or best case scenario, personnel wise, because remember, I'm on personnel here. Anthony Rizzo is your first baseman. That's a World Series caliber first baseman. Oh, really? In what world did people think that Rizzo was going to be taking monster at bats in an October run? In what world did people think that DJ LeMahieu is going to be taking big at bats in October and we were going to be winning against the Houstons, against Baltimore, and then luckily go play the Dodgers, the Braves, or the Phillies, and we're going to run these jabronis out there and we're going to win? I feel like I'm not giving anything or offering anything here that people don't already know. I'm just bringing it to the table, Jake, and just get people to understand that Trent Grisham can't be your first guy off the bench.
No,
that's insanity.
He can't. And I think if Cashman is smart here, Torres, I would trade Torres. I would trade Verdugo. I would trade Cortez. Straight up. Those
what are they going to give us for Cortez? A freaking thing of paper towels?
I mean, Cortez would still be considered a valuable pitcher at the deadline. Think about it.
Is it?
Think about it, right? So
I'm trying to think about it for sure.
Think like when you think of a pitcher, I'll give you a hint. He just pitched the other day against the Yankees. When you think about a pitcher at the deadline, he's been traded like 5 times. He'll have an ERA pretty much hovering around where Cortez has his right now.
Who, Quintana?
Yep.
He's just right. So if he's traded Quintana, so what are you getting for him? Traded. A freaking thing of Kirkland paper towels. You're not getting jack for freaking Nestor Cortez. Nestor Cortez, if you decide to trade him, all these other teams in baseball, you know who would trade for him? It's probably like the Los Angeles Angels. They're like, here, we'll give you Joe Adele. Joe Adele will go hit 204 for you. Good luck.
I'll take Joe Adele for Cortez. No, no, I would take Joe Adele. I wouldn't trade Cortez for him. I actually think Cortez is more valuable than that. I would probably say Cortez could get you. I think they could use it as a pitcher swap too. They could trade him in a deal to maybe try and get like Tyone or something like that. I mean, I don't know.
Chicago did say they're trying to sell, but I'm here to tell you right now, if you're trading for a player that's low on stuff, the whole broadcast today was like, yeah, Nestor Cortez, he's a high spin player. He really wants to get that elevated carrying fastball through the zone, that four-seamer, really speed the bat up, and that way he can slow you down with that cutter. Makes a lot of sense. The whole broadcast crew was really hitting the nail on the head there. Yeah, but what happens if that cutter is just right down the absolute ding-a-ling and it's being hit 475 feet? How valuable is he then?
Yeah. No,
how good is that fastball when it's back spinning straight into the barrel of the bat consistently? And everyone told me he's great at home, and he just gave up 400 runs in his last start at home, and then he gets shelled on the road. That's literally what I just watched.
And he can't pitch on the road, so they have to trade him. You can't sit there as Cashman. You can't sit there as Cashman and say Jordan Montgomery with like a 3.15 ERA at the time.
Yep.
Like, yeah, we're going to trade him away because I don't believe he could pitch in the postseason.
That's what they said.
But then be like, Cortez, I know he can't pitch on the road, but we're going to keep him anyway. Like, so is he just, I've never heard a situational starting pitcher.
Where can he pitch effectively?
Well, he's had a really good season at home. That was a bad start. But to your point, though, you can't have bad starts at home when you are abysmal on the road. Now, Gary, I want to talk about a few of the names that Bowden brought up to wrap up this show. The first name, Esteves. You mentioned the Angels with Cortez. I'm not saying the Angels are a fit for Cortez at all, but you mentioned the Angels, so I figured I'd bring up Esteves. Thought it was an interesting name that he brought up. He's having a good year. His baseball savant is not bad. It's not great. I'm not like obsessed with it or anything. It's not like turning on Mason Miller's baseball savant and just, if you're a fan of seeing long red lines, there you go. But Esteves is a little intriguing to me. He brought him up as an option. He said, essentially that the Yankees are going to, they're not all in on bats. They're looking at both. Everything we keep reading, even since the interview, like at least I keep reading, is that the Yankees are all in on relief pitching. And so it makes me feel at least somewhat good, because I don't think you can continue to watch Clay Holmes like this and be interested in Tanner Scott and say, yeah, Tanner, you're going to go behind Clay Holmes. No. I think the Yankees are acquiring their next closer. Now, is it the closer of the future? Tanner Scott would be a rental. And to me, I don't do a deal for Tanner Scott without also getting Jazz Chisholm. I'm just being honest. Now, I think also the same applies, because I think a lot of these teams like to package players. I think the same thing applies with Esteves and Renifo. I think they would want to package those guys. I'm less interested in Renifo. I don't think he'll be as good in New York. I don't. I will say I saw that spray chart for Jazz, the home runs. He would be very good, I think, in New York. And Jim even said he thinks he would be good in New York. And, so there were.
It is interesting that everyone always projects that players do get better. Okay, so hang with me here.
Yeah.
Usually when we see a player playing somewhere else in a smaller market, and they're a little tweener, right? They're edging on to being a good player, but they haven't reached that potential. Usually we see players like that and we just project them to being on a bigger stage, so they're going to elevate. But what's interesting about that is that when they get here, people always tell me that playing for the Yankees is harder than playing for any other team, to which I agree. So I want to bite back on that he's just going to get better when he gets to New York. It's hard to play here. And a lot of times great players go to another level, and the players who were kind of fringe, that aren't really sure about themselves, they haven't really figured out their game, it almost seems like they almost always go below expectation. So do I expect Jazz Chisholm to just be awful when he gets to New York? I don't. But I don't want to just shoe him in as a success story, like he's going to get better when he gets to New York, because I could have told you this. Alex Verdugo, when he gets to New York, all those hustle problems that Alex Cora was just grilling him on, that's not going to be a problem when he gets to New York. Everyone's going to be watching him. Everyone's going to be asking him about his hustle. Has Alex Verdugo picked up his hustle at any point this year?
The first half of the first half, he did.
So the 8th of the year, he was his best self, and then suddenly New York's lights got too bright, and it didn't help him. All of a sudden, it didn't bring him to the next level. So that's my point.
I get your point. I will say, regardless, if Jazz plays exactly how he's playing right now, the Yankees just got astronomically better. I'm just going to be honest. So, I mean, we didn't really get a chance to bring up Rosario with him, but he didn't mention Rosario. So maybe Rosario's not in play at all. I didn't really think Rosario was in play. It was more so I think you and I kind of have been on that train. That train doesn't really exist outside of you and I. I don't see anybody mention.
No, we naturally got to that spot because I know like a lot of times people just wait around and see a tweet and they're like, oh, this is what we're after. And then they kind of obsess about that. No, we've kind of looked at all the rosters and we're like, well, hold on a second. What do we need? This team needs athleticism. They need contact, not just contact where you just beat ground balls. They need contact that doesn't end up in a glove. And Rosario has done that. That's part of the reason why the Yankees were after him.
That's what we need, some line drive hitters. That's what I'll say. I mean,
good.
You know, guys that can hit into the gap and stuff. I mean, obviously you're not always going to have that. It's not always going to go in the gap. I thought an interesting name that I saw, Nico Horner. Everyone's talking about Tyone. I would rather get Horner and play him at third. You know, I've been impressed with him for a while, actually. And the fact that Chicago is actually even considering getting rid of him was kind of surprising. I think really
kind of in a Gleyber Torres spot, because you have to remember, if you look at Horner's numbers, excellent in 2021, 2022, and 2023. If we got any version of those players, it's awesome. But what he's been this year is a 254 hitter, right? He's driven in 30, 33 walks, 44 Ks. So he's been
332 on base.
Yeah, so. Which we've been saying. We're looking for a dude to get on at like a 315 to 320 clip, which is insane to say, but that's where baseball's at. So that is the massive upgrade. And I will say, just getting league average, we were talking about this in the Mets broadcast, they were really bringing this home. Having league average guys after star players on your roster makes your team that much better. It makes you really good. But when the bad teams, like when I compared this Yankees team to the 2022 Angels, essentially what I was saying in a joking manner was that we have stars, and then a bunch of jabronis, below average players. And it makes our team look bad. When in actuality, you don't have to go get Sammy Sosa to go hit 6. You need a comparable bat that can go be league average. And that's something we don't do.
No, I mean, you are right there. You know, Jim also mentioned our friend who we talked about. First ever episode was about him, actually. Blake Snell.
That was interesting that he thinks that we would be even involved, or just thought that would be a fit. I think if I saw Blake Snell on the mound for the Yankees, and I know he's pitching much better of late, I think my hair would fall out. I just don't know if I'm ready for that experience.
For 7 innings. I don't know about that.
I just don't dig it. Yeah, it really is Clay Holmes, because he doesn't mind walking guys. And Yankee Stadium, the way Yankee Stadium plays, is most often when you even watch a dominant start from a Yankee starter, they give up some random bomb to right field. Obviously, they get porched. And if you're walking guys consistently, and Rodon's learned this, you're going to give up that homer, and it's, instead of being a solo bomb, it's a 2-run or a 3-run bomb, and it tends to undo your start. So I'm not digging the Blake Snell start. Love everything else Bowden said, but I don't have to agree on their targets or necessarily fits. I'm not in love with it.
No, I wasn't in love with it either. Figured I'd bring it up. You know, kind of to wrap up the show, Rock Riggio, who's one of their prospects, I think he's in the 20s. I'm going to check real quick before we sign off here. But he did not play today. No injury, 18th actually in the farm system. In high A, did not play today. And a lot of people, #HugWatch, they were calling that out. I suspect there's going to be a trade soon. I kind of felt like there'd be one tonight after the game. I really think there's going to be a trade soon. And you know what's weird? He really seems, Jim really seemed kind of like he of the belief that like a Pete Fairbanks, who we've brought up multiple times, and Isak Paredes, like he made it sound like that was really in play.
He wrote an article for the LA Times, and just to warn everybody, his first trade that he said the Yankees should be after is that trade, Paredes, Fairbanks. That was the package. And then it made me pay for the article, and obviously I wasn't subscribed to LA Times, so I couldn't see it, but that was his first package.
Well, let's put it this way. I think Fairbanks we would all take. I think he would help the bullpen tremendously. And he's got a little personality I kind of like. But Paredes, this is actually the fascinating thing, Gary. Again, like ending the show here. But this is the fascinating thing, okay? Because Ben Rice is struggling, first base is absolutely open. So Paredes doesn't even, like, that was kind of my thing when Ben Rice was hitting well. I didn't really understand the Paredes fit, but now it's like, I get it. It's kind of similar to when we were talking about it earlier in the year. Passan brought up that they should trade for McMahon.
Oh, yeah. Like a third baseman.
Remember, you and I were like,
yeah, why do we need a third baseman?
It didn't make any sense.
Right.
And then Cabrera started falling off, and then he got benched for DJ LeMahieu, and now it's like, now Yankee fans wish that the Rockies would trade McMahon. It's funny how it works. It's also kind of a reminder that you can always get better. I think that's what I learned today. You know how you learn something new every day? That's the thing I learned today. You already mentioned what you learned, but I
forgot. What did I learn?
From that the rest of the league hates our prospects.
Been known that. I didn't learn anything about the Yankees today.
Well, you said that like you learned, or I forget how you worded it. But anyway, point I'm making here is that really, I guess we've always been on the right track. Going back to the Rooker talk, you can always get better. You can always get better. And sometimes I get it. Sometimes the best move is the one you don't make. Not in baseball. When you have a $300 million payroll and you have a farm system that has one guy available in your top 6 at the AAA level. And if you asked me about that a week ago or even yesterday, I'd say they don't have one guy available at the AAA level until you get to 7th, which is Will Warren. Now Jason Dominguez is back. So he is available. But it doesn't really coincide with the timeline. And so I think we're going to see, sounded like with Jim, they're going to be aggressive. We need it. We'll see what ends up happening. But guys, you'll have to keep it here because, we're going to have 2 more guests on for this, like MLB trade deadline.
We'll announce them tomorrow.
But yeah, we're excited. At least I know I'm excited. I think we're going to get moves. And at this point, I'm fine with whatever. I want to see better baseball in bullpen, in the lineup. I don't care about defense. I really don't. That's the sacrifice I'm willing to make. Go out and just get me some bats and a closer for the love of God.
I wish I was as optimistic as you were. I wish I was. And so I'm probably just going to call it a night and go sit down in bed and think about everything that's coming the next 2 or 3 days and all the people who are going to tweet me and ask me questions about why the Yankees did this, why the Yankees did that. And I'm going to have no answer. And it's going to be demoralizing. But I will say, part of the sanity that's going to bring me is that I was prepared. I expected this.
As long as they don't have a deadline like last year. Yeah, they got Keenan Middleton. So they just basically were like, yeah, we don't want these prospects. Just gave them away for a guy who with an expiring deal who they didn't bring back.
If they do that again, I'm just going to donate my kidneys and just call it a year.
He's dead serious too. Look at him.
So serious.
Well, anyway, that's going to do it. We appreciate you guys. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and we'll be back tomorrow.
And like this video.